General Vagon has called the Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Welcome to the Lead Pursuit Podcast, a podcast covering Blood Red Skies, a game of World War II aerial combat. Welcome to Episode 2. Thanks for joining us. Well, we've played a couple games of Blood Red Skies over the last 48 hours, and I think we have a couple observations and things that we're going to talk about tonight. Overall, I think we all like the game.
Absolutely.
I think there's some things that are frustrating.
I'm right there. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Some things that we don't know why they're done the way they're done, but that's fine. That's any game and the game system that it has. But I think we want to take some time and just talk through the missions that we played, the things we learned playing those missions, the different aircraft we played, and some of the unique takeaways that we have. So I'll start off a little bit because we've talked about the forces that I play, and for all but one game today I played the RAF, and I played RAF Spitfires. I did play one game of ME-109s against Chris and his Russian aircraft. What I will say is that it's the Spitfire, after having kind of proxied a few games and worked my way through it, I thought I understood how well it performed. It was interesting to actually play it against a real opponent instead of just myself and see how those interact with an ME-109 and some of the abilities the ME-109 has to counter it. But beyond all that, I had one continual frustration, and it really came from me not reading the scenarios very well, because there's things that I think we assumed from our other game experience, like our Warhammer experience, that everybody starts on one side of the table and everyone on the other side starts on the other side.
Oh, right.
And as Brett saw that Chris and I were running a scenario where I assumed I had to start across the board. I could have started right behind him, and I didn't realize that. But so rule number one is read the scenarios.
Yes, it is.
RTFI. If you don't know what RTFI means, go look it up. So RTFI, in this case RTFS. But there was a continual point of frustration that we'll talk about with the boom chit mechanic, and I understand why it's there. It's a amalgamation of battle fatigue, injury to aircraft, injury to personnel, fuel, ammunition, stores, all those kind of things being rolled together. But there's times that, at least I felt, sometimes there was disproportionate damage done to a force on a few airplanes, a few really resilient airplanes that wouldn't die, that kept getting wailed on turn after turn after turn, where boom chits kept getting generated, and you couldn't get them out of the dogfight they're in. And it felt, not saying it's not a dig on the rules, but it felt a little unfair as you're trying to race across the board and get to these aircraft you're saving. But that was also, I didn't need to start across the board.
Yep.
That happened in your game with Chris, right?
It did. So it happened in the Russian game, which what we were playing was we were playing the fighter sweep scenario. And what I didn't understand, having been playing scenarios with you where we were supposed to be across the board, that once my disadvantaged airplanes were out on the board, then he put his next set of airplanes within 18 inches, or greater than 18 inches away, I'm sorry. And then I had to do the same thing. I could have positioned also, on that same side of the board, but more than 18 inches away from his, and that my high cover didn't have to be on the other side of the board either. My high cover could have been right there on that side. So Chris and I could have had our forces in about a 24-inch part of this board all there. And there would have been very little maneuver range. Everybody would have been right in everyone else's chili, but difference of being disadvantaged, advantaged, high cover, that would have added a little bit of interesting mechanic, because we had that in our game, Brett, where you didn't fall for the trap too bad. You did get pretty close to my board edge to where my high cover was waiting, which allowed them to come in and influence the game directly. But you were smart enough to go, why am I going to fly and then put my 6 o'clock right at his high cover there? I'm solving the problem for him. So there were some interesting mechanics there that I think have an ability to be deep if you're playing them well. They are frustrating if you're not really thinking about how everything should be set up.
What happened with the boom chit things? I think I missed that on Chris's game. Was it a situation where aircraft kept
So
coming
he was
back
chasing.
up
No, he was chasing two aircraft that just wouldn't die, but he kept hitting them, and so they were disadvantaged.
Yep.
They would get hit. I'd take a boom chit, but they would dodge, so they wouldn't get shot down.
Okay.
And so for 3 turns, he punished this poor section, this 2 ship of ME-109s that was running across the board for their buddies who were running across the board to get to them, and that's not how it had to start. It could have started with my fighter sweeps section that wasn't in high cover, could have started 18 inches away from his fighters. And so I'll bring up 18 inches as a very important number. And I don't think Andy Chambers chose it arbitrarily. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk to him about it, why he chose 18 inches. But when you maneuver the aircraft around and speed 7 fighters all fall into this, the radius of their turn, not using tight turn or any other performance characteristics, not doing a maneuver, not burning advantage for a maneuver, their radius is 18 inches. And so it's about the what we would call in the fighter community an energy sustaining turn radius. So you are going to exit that turn at the same energy state you started. So the assumption is if I'm an advantaged fighter and I make a 180-degree turn just using my movement, I'm going to be 18 inches displaced on the board. So what it really allows you to do, if you think about it, is an 18-inch distance between you and a bandit allows you to neutralize the fight. So you, regardless of if he starts at your 6 o'clock, you don't start truly at a, and I'm going to mix my terms here, at a disadvantage. You could be disadvantaged, but the fact is, just through regular maneuvering, you're going to be able to bring it to a point where you're now turning 180 degrees over 4 different moves through your 45-degree moves. Then, of course, you can always things change, though, as people can dive and reclimb for advantage, or you have abilities like Great Climb where I can defeat your ability to climb back for advantage. And so you have to kind of work through some of those as appropriate. But what were some of the frustrations that you guys felt just kind of looking at the game for the first time? Because I know, Brett, you and I played at Adepticon. It was a very much handheld game by the Warlord team, and they were awesome. They did a great intro for us, but they really walked us through that first game. So today was kind of our first free-form game in a sense.
Yeah, really doing it on our own. I wouldn't call it frustration. I mean, it's still I'm taking it all in, right? I don't look at the board and see all the angles, and it's the matrix isn't happening for me as I'm playing the game, so I'm still figuring it out. But I think after really only a couple of games, and we use the cards and everything, I feel like that quickly could figure out the depth of the card mechanics. Like I wasn't so confused on the cards. It was pretty easy to pick up.
And for me, it felt like a lot of it also, while the abilities of the aircraft were different, the effects kind of mirrored each other. So that, sure, tight turn and great climb are 2 different effects, but they're both ways you can neutralize what somebody is trying to do, or especially the benefit of tight turn is sometimes I can get myself to a firing solution faster than the other aircraft.
Well, and those decisions about the pilot action, at the first game or 2, I think I was confusing outmaneuver and shooting scenarios where there was different range versus
and the tailing mechanic.
Yeah,
so the tailing mechanic is something that the diagram is drawn well in there. It's funny when you go out to the Warlord forum, there's more diagrams people have drawn to really try to explain to people about how the tailing mechanic works, because I think what I learned the most out of this game, besides getting beaten up and actually only winning one of these games, but I learned how to put your aircraft in a position to be that wingman to deny tailing opportunities.
That was really evident in your game with Chris, just walking past the board and seeing
that's
all that.
That's what kept crushing me. It was like every time I turned around, boom, he had a wingman covering him, but my guys were hanging out in the wind. They had split off and they had nobody covering them.
Right. But so the funny thing though was that was a closer game than you might think. You might think, oh, okay, Doug has figured out the wingman part of tailing and how to deny a tailing advantage to Chris. So therefore he must have had hardly any boom chits. No, I had 6 boom chits for 8 aircraft I started the game with. So my problem was I kept still taking shots or getting shot at. I just was denying him knocking me to immediately down to disadvantaged. But there were advantaged fighters of yours. They kept popping, come out of the cloud neutral, climb up, and the next turn they're shooting somebody because I wasn't able to influence them. So that's where I keep coming back to frustration with the boom chit mechanic, because I'm denying him the ability to make me disadvantaged, but I'm still taking a boom chit. And so there's an element of frustration where you're like, I can't do everything perfect. I can't deny you the shot. Why am I getting penalized? Why, even though I've defended against the shot, I'm still getting penalized for getting shot. But that's fine. That's the mechanics of hit versus catastrophic hit and versus a hit you don't dodge.
Yeah.
What do you think about just the overall narrative? We use these mats that, look pretty good, I think, and the planes.
So I like
well.
the mats. I'm kind of glad that I forgot to bring my sky mat that we were going to cut up and use as backgrounds for some of the closer shots of the models, because these mouse pad style mats are nice. Who did you get these from?
I got them from a couple of places. This one, the one we're looking at now, is I really, as I look closely at it, it's probably a World War I Europe, because I think if you look really close, like you said, it looks like maybe trench lines and stuff, an aerial view of the countryside. But anyway, it's really nice. I think when I first got this, I was thinking maybe Eastern Front, maybe Defense of the Reich. But this one's from Deep Cut Studio. I found it online, just Google searching. The other two, I have one that's sort of coastal Kent or something. It's got the channel and the coast.
Right.
And
I liked that. I like that map.
Yeah, I got that one, and I got the Pacific Sea one from Tiny War Games. Tiny War Gaming, I think it's called. And they have a U.S. distributor as well. So, but yeah, the quality's real good. But I thought, it was kind of fun because I think this has the potential to be such a great, the narrative, the visual, the aesthetic of it. I think is an important component for me, and I thought that worked well.
Well, and that was something I know, Chris, we talked about was the visual component of this and getting yourself to a certain level of detail.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the two of you are far better painters and modelers than I am. I am the weak one of this trio when it comes to those skills. But I thought that it was still enjoyable for me to play with models that had some things done differently, like you guys didn't use all the prop discs. I guess I'm the only fool that glued his prop discs on. But even though the models, I don't think any of them were exactly where we wanted them to be for a perfect, model for 1/200th scale, they still played really well, and you felt good moving them around the table. You didn't feel that you're pushing your army of shame in its gray plastic around the table.
No, I'll caveat off that. Brett's look pretty darn good. I think Brett's there.
I don't think he is. I think he has hours and hours of work. He needs to go back to his painting hole and keep painting.
I mean, there is something about being shot down by another just badass looking airplane that it does make things a little bit better. I mean,
it doesn't. No.
It does. It did for me.
Did it make it better for Lydia? Because she's a smoking hole in the center of the board.
She is, but she got a 109 before she went down. So
she's still a smoking hole. Congratulations.
It was my first game, and I got an air kill. That's all that matters.
So I beat you in 30K at Adepticon, and I beat you. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm continuing my trend.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. We'll see how it goes tomorrow when we get 30K back out.
Yeah, I didn't bring it. We're going to play Zone Mortalis, right? Small army. Didn't bring enough. I'll be painting my dust miniatures. Okay, so I think there's a lot of things we walked away from. We used clouds a lot in some of the battles, and that's an interesting mechanic and an interesting game changer, especially when the fight centers around those clouds. Because Chris, I know it became a real point of frustration that you're looking at. You're like, I see there are these MU-109s in the clouds. How are they going to threaten me coming back out of the clouds?
Yeah,
and they would.
And a large part of the frustration for me was I could use the clouds too, but being my first game, it was okay. So what exactly can I do in the cloud? So I wasn't able to do that. Okay, I don't know the rules well enough yet where I could set myself up 1-2. For me, it was basically, okay, it's my turn. Can I get in somebody's freaking 6 and shoot at them?
That's where I will offer 2 points. One, that the Warlord team did a very good job with us. They gave us a very basic game. No clouds, no cards. We didn't play with cards. We just played the basic maneuvering mechanics of the game until somebody accumulated too many boom chits and their squadron went home. And so I thought that was a great way to get into it and not get worried about what is the appropriate counter to somebody else's card. Just don't play with that level of depth. Mm-hmm. Just understand how the aircraft maneuver in the game.
That sequence.
The sequence of your maneuvering and why tailing is important and why tailing only happens at a certain point in the game. After you've done your maneuvering and everything, that's when it comes in, because then there's the choice of, okay, now I'm tailing this guy. Do I shoot him? Or do I climb up for an advantage and maybe go ahead and use that later on for more ability to kill people? Or do I not even shoot him? Do I outmaneuver his wingman, who's not affecting me but is going to be a factor later on? So maybe I don't want to shoot anybody, but I want to knock both of them to a less advantaged state. So I thought that was really interesting to play through a little of those. And my recommendation kind of to the community is if you pick up the game and you look at it and you are a miniatures war gamer who comes from a background with no cards, from games like 40K, where you're really not playing those except maybe for psychic powers and things. If you're not used to the card mechanic, if you don't necessarily understand all the aircraft in the clouds, barrage balloon mechanic, don't use them. Just put your airplanes out there, figure out how the airplanes move. And my second point is, I felt I did learn a lot by pushing around 2 ME-109s and 2 Spitfires on my dining room table, just figuring out the maneuver mechanics. Because I think when I walked into today's games, different than you, Brett, I felt comfortable with the aircraft maneuvering.
Right.
Now, there were some rules, things we had to learn about, the tailing mechanic and when it applies and what clouds can do to that maneuver and your ability to employ a slightly different maneuver because you burn the advantage, but then you could be leaving the cloud and making that maneuver later. But I think for me, just pushing around and figuring out how models moved and how they got to a shooting solution, that gave me a little bit of an advantage. Not that it helped because I still lost, but it made it easier for me to move my miniatures around the table and not have to think through it.
Two games was sufficient to, I think, kind of solidify the order of operation.
Absolutely.
That sequence. I think after 2 games, I felt pretty comfortable. Like, okay, it's this, then this, then this, and I knew what the options were for pilot action.
Correct.
Yeah, that was easy. A couple games and you're ready to go. And I like your advice about just pushing a couple planes around without worrying about cards. Just follow that cheat sheet that comes in the starter box with the order of operation and just get that sequence down and the decision-making process for your pilot action.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I think that was what the struggle was for me, and
Right.
the struggle was real today. So it was jumping in, having clouds on the table, I think we had 6 I had 6 aircraft, you had 8 aircraft. Right. We were playing with the cards, clouds. I was just
and that's kind of the beauty of doing the scenarios in order for everybody. Because scenario 0 is that reconnaissance scenario that actually was the most fun of any one of the scenarios I played today. I enjoyed it, one, because I had painted up a pink reconnaissance Spitfire, just like you would have had at that phase of the war.
We all know you like pink airplanes.
Don't judge me.
It's gender labor. We don't do that here.
So that to me was a fun mission because I took the unarmed faster variant. So I get 50 knots. I get an extra move out of it, but I can't shoot you. So all I got to do is run and stiff arm you. And we even talked about there's some decisions that I made playing that were a little counterintuitive for me as an aviator. So there was a point where I knew you were going to catch up to me. But for the purposes of the game, turning into you to make that close aboard pass didn't do me any good. I still had to run to the edge of the board because if I made it to the edge of the board, by golly, I was going to get there. And of course, you shot me down right as I was about 5 inches from the edge of the board from moving off the next turn. But I think if you play that one, you learn those basic mechanics, and you're not going to have clouds when you play Scenario 0. You're just going to set up 3 airplanes, two ME-109s, 1 Spitfire, and you're going to figure out that how do I move? How do I use tight turn to hold off the ME-109?
There's not so much going on that you can't try a couple of dives or some maneuvers.
Right, and you don't get lost in I don't want to do that because it's going to put me in front of him, and his other wingman over there is going to do X, Y, or Z. There's so few airplanes. It's really not very intimidating. I do think the level of complexity steps up rapidly, though, when you go to those other scenarios, specifically when you start playing theater cards. Because what might start as a 2v2 in the second mission suddenly can be a 4v4, could be a 4v6, because the Germans can bring in 2 extra 109s if they choose to use that card and play it at the beginning. And so all of a sudden you go, all right, this complexity is stepping up because, as we've seen, having a hand with 3 cards, the magic number is once you get above about 4 airplanes, you start not being able to do everything you want in one turn. And having to really decide, okay, am I going to burn this tight turn? Am I going to burn this great climb? Because I can't do it for almost everybody. I can only do it for some of my pilots.
Well, I also found getting the ace card early and having an ace that's not in position to do anything is a little bit detrimental in that it's a whole card that just sits there.
Snapshot set in my hand for so long because I had Galland there and I was waiting for one of you morons to fly in front of him at what would be not a tail or nose on shot, so it would be a deflection shot, so I could play this card. and everybody was head on or tail on to him. And I'm like, well, I should have
And I've
discarded it.
I had Killer Instinct on Lydia, and there was at no point was I able to get within 3 inches of you, because
Right.
that's what it is. I get crits, when I get within 3, it's an automatic critical. So I just couldn't play the card, and I couldn't get rid of the card because it's there. So it's one
you
less
can discard
card.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can always discard it, but the problem is you say every time you do that, it goes to the rest
it
of the
goes
discard
completely
pile.
to
And
the
you're like,
bottom.
I don't know it, especially in a larger game where you have 6 or 8 aircraft, and now there's maybe 6 or 8 cards sitting in the discard pile. The odds of that one coming back when you need it are pretty slim.
Yep.
You have a 4v4 out there. The odds that you're going to pull a tight turn, great climb, any one of your aircraft specific cards you care about is pretty high. So, like with Brett and I was tight turning the whole time. I was having a great
Yeah,
time
you were
because
wearing that out, yeah.
I'm wearing that card out because I know that I'm at least drawing one. So I'm at least going to be able, the odds are high, I'm going to be able to do that for one airplane. I may not be able to get half my airplanes to do this, but it's an interesting mechanic.
Do you guys have a favorite card? You use the tight turn.
Well, I use because I fly Spitfires. That's the only aircraft maneuver I have. So tight turn is,
and we're the same with
yeah.
the Axe. The Axe is the tight turn. I mean, that's what it does.
I like the
So-
great climb. I had great climb and great dive, but great climb I liked a lot because it would allow me to deny sometimes something you would try to do. So that was fun.
I'll be honest. My favorite is not an aircraft tactic. It is a doctrine card, and it's defensive tactics. It's the ability to maneuver your airplane to either force somebody to take a deflection shot or to force it into a head-on shot. And so you now have a shooting opportunity. And so it's really fascinating that as you look at that card, and I don't think I have it sitting out here in front of us, but it gives you an ability to actually change what's a very bad situation to be something where you're like, all right, he may get a boom chip, but he's not going to shoot me down now because I'm going to have a pretty good chance to
I think
defend.
it was a doctrine card I used a couple times that I was like, oh man, a good thing I have this. It was the one that let me dive a disadvantaged aircraft.
Correct.
That was a
correct.
good one. I used that a couple
That was
times.
because it can be played with great dive, and I can't remember the name of it is now.
Yeah, I don't have
But yes,
it in
that
front
was
of me.
the one that normally ended up inside your arsenal. So that was a good one. And there's a lot of good cards that really shuffle. And I think they've done a very good job with, by theater, breaking out the theater cards, and by year breaking out the doctrine cards, such that they make a good sense. Yes.
Well,
Well,
even
low
with-
altitude performance is one of them.
Yep.
So you brought that one up. Low altitude performance. The thing that I like about that is that obviously allows you to take that disadvantaged plane, and you've already moved last. You've probably been shot at. Hopefully, all you've done is eat some boom chits off this poor guy. But the first thing you do is you make him advantaged, and that's huge for me because if you're already going to have this poor guy bug out of the fight, now he can dive, and he can extend out of the fight, or he can also then make a maneuver, maybe just truck straight ahead, go ahead and climb back up if there's other people protecting his 6 o'clock, another wingman that he can fly towards. So low altitude performance is definitely an interesting one. And maybe what we need to do is, after a few more games under our belt, sit down and just talk about how our card style may or may not have changed.
Okay.
Because I wasn't big on the doctrine cards and the theater cards starting off. They seemed more cumbersome than helpful.
The aircraft cards we use routinely. In the game.
Right. So the aircraft cards I was comfortable with. I'm like, that makes sense to me. That's how my airplane performs. But as I went through a couple of these games, I'm like, I'm starting to like the doctrine and the theater cards because it give me a flavor of the Air Force beyond just the theater card of numbers. We're like, awesome, I get 2 extra airplanes. That's cool. But besides, having that one as a theater, some of the doctrinal changes and things made it pretty interesting.
Although we didn't play with them, we have the expansion pack cards. It was cool to look at the expansion pack cards and see how it potentially changes the game for future games as we play later war missions or later war aircraft. I thought it was kind of a pretty cool and insightful thing to add to the game. It just adds a little change to it. You look at how the different versions.
Well, you look at the
of
109 because you've got 3
change,
different 109s
Yeah.
now that you've got the expansion with the Fox and the Kilo, and you've got the Echo is what comes in the basic game.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of
Or
neat.
whatever
We didn't play
your
with those today, but it was
German equivalent name is the Ernst whatever. Yeah.
Emil, the Franz, and the Carl, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Emil, the Franz, and the Carl, or the Echo Fox Kilo. Sorry. I'm not smart. I will not remember
But
those.
today was the first day I even opened that expansion pack box, but it was cool. To see the cards and see where this can go for us. With future missions and other.
All the bombers
other
of
games.
yours that I can shoot down.
Yeah,
It's
right.
going to be fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
That'll be good. I'll enjoy that. Right. See how that works out for me. Well, good. What were some of the other, at least things you might have been concerned about that you kind of walked into the game going, how is this going to play out? Is this going to be fun? What were some of the things that went really well where you were pleasantly surprised that either the game mechanic flowed well or you were pleasantly surprised that it was fun to get everybody stuck in a fur ball and be all within an inch, 2 inches of each other and have to make those tactical decisions?
I like the decision-making process, and I like that you're not knowing the rules, and I wasn't frog stomped. You know, it
Right.
felt like I was still in the game, you know, even though I was learning and trying to figure out and making mistakes.
Starting tomorrow, no more coaching now. You guys, when I played the first games against you, you beat me fair and square. I just had to laugh. I'm like, man, I should not have thrown that good idea out there.
Right.
But there's a lot of us learning, I think, and that's the great thing about playing amongst friends and not being worried about it. Yeah, there's no ego in me winning or losing those first couple games. It was a lot of fun to sit there and go, oh man, what you really ought to do is this, because you probably don't see how bad you could screw up the rest of my plan.
Yeah, you really led us well, I think, in helping us figure out how it works and make good choices as we
Right.
played along. So that was good.
Well, I think that's one of the things that in a gaming group that plays Blood Red Skies, that's a level of depth I would hope people would get to. Because I'll be frank, I look at a lot of the battle reports out on the internet, some of the YouTube videos. There's a lot of people flying head on right at each other and taking a lot of head on shots. It's like they're playing Warhammer 40K in the skies. Everybody wants to get in charge range and punch the other guy in the face. This game isn't designed to do that. This is aerial combat for a reason. And we had a few head on shots. And there were some really interesting choices as people started accumulating boom chits, and you're like,
Those are dicey.
Those are dicey because I need to put a boom chit on him, but I may eat another one
Right.
just for doing that. And we can't just discard both of them and say nobody got a chit. That could push me closer over the edge than him.
It's not an optimal firing solution, right?
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of much more maneuvering in our games than I had seen on a lot of the internet battle reports, and I was happy for that because that was us learning how to play an aerial combat game, not how to push pieces of plastic at each other until we get within close attack range and roll a bunch of dice.
I found it tough to get tailing solutions. I felt like how am I? The whole time I'm looking at the game, I'm trying to figure out how do I get into a tailing situation. But what I was forgetting is the outmaneuver piece,
Right.
Because that's 9 inches, right?
Right. So that's the great part is sure you're not getting to an automatic disadvantage solution, but let me just get close to this guy, outmaneuver him, and outmaneuver that aircraft, and especially when you have an automatic like having an ace who's skill 5 against a skill 3 pilot out there. That's an automatic shift of one level. And if you do it at the right time, as people are moving in that activation order, then that can be really important because you can have your ace who might still just be neutral, take that other neutral fighter down to disadvantage so they don't get to move, and your other neutral fighter now behind him can be in a firing
I think
solution.
future games I'll be looking for more opportunities to outmaneuver than I was in my first game.
Right. See, mine's the exact opposite. So when I pushed the plastic around the table by myself, I spent a lot of time using outmaneuver. I found today I spent a lot more time putting myself into a tailing position, and more importantly, setting up a wingman to be covering me so that no matter who popped out of the clouds, you might have a chance to shoot me, but you were going to shoot me at the advantage level I was already at. And you weren't going to automatically drive me into disadvantage.
I'm still learning that. I still have to learn the angles on all that, right?
It's kind of like that joke that we used to have in marine aviation that you'd go out and you'd fly these missions where it's one fighter and 2 bandits, and at some point you get in a daisy chain. There's a bandit in front of you, you're trying to shoot him, and his wingman's behind you trying to shoot you. And we found that a couple times where we got into this chain of disadvantagedness that at some point somebody breaks it by bringing their wingman into the fight. And for me, on the former aviator side, I love that because that's exactly how multi-plane engagement went. Everybody would think, I've got this great firing solution. I'm about to maneuver where I can gun this guy. Where did that F5 come from? I'm going to pitch out and have to defend against his impending gunshot. And those are the decisions that I think, especially we were making, Chris.
Yeah, that was the rough part for me, honestly. The wingman mechanic was, I think, the one that was hardest for me to catch on to.
Right.
And at the end, I was starting to get it. But it really is.
Well, that was the unfair advantage. I had
huge.
played 3 games today, between today and yesterday against Brett. and then I played you on my fourth
Oh,
game.
you laughingly say that it's a lot of people play it like 40K. I don't know if you noticed, but I played 40K today.
You charged right at me, and it was
charged
wonderful.
right at you. That's kind of a Russian Air Force tactic.
Kind of Russian tactic. That worked out awesome as you pushed two of the ME-109s around for a while, and then it didn't work so well.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that, once again, is just comfort level with the game. And knowing how the mechanics work such that you can take a look at it and you see the options on the board. Because, to be honest, we do it in 40K. We can talk later about do you allow someone to pre-check distances and firing arcs in this game, and what that brings is a house rule, taking that whole capability away, which I think makes things really fascinating but really frustrating. But if you think about like 40K, there's a lot that we just look at the board and go, I can tell that I am going to be within a move and a pretty good odds of a charge of getting to that enemy unit over there. Or I'll use the example from 30K a lot of times, going back under the 7th edition rules. There's things where you can look at it and you go, I'm going to face multiple different disordered charges if I do this. That is not a situation I want to go into. While it's physically possible for me to get there, it's not going to be very good when I get there.
Yeah.
So what were some of the other takeaways that you guys had? Silence in a podcast is not a good thing.
This is great radio.
It's a good thing all three of us have a face for podcasting.
I want to learn how to set that up. I felt like as I was moving my aircraft, I generally kept two aircraft kind of around each other, but I don't know if that was really doing any good. So where I could defeat a tail, position my aircraft to better defeat a potential tailing situation, or be in a position to better tail. I don't really. I still have to figure that out.
Yeah, for me, it's the fact that I need to learn the rules well enough that I can start planning. I got to start.
Oh wait, this sounds like playing 30K with you.
I know.
You need to know the rules.
Well, I played checkers today, and this is definitely a game where you have to play chess.
You tell me to paint my stuff. Learn your rules.
So
it's front and back of a card. It's not hard. I realize, fellow Marine,
you got 4 other systems in your head.
Would you like me to bring you some crayons in case you get hungry? You might need to eat some of them, but draw out the rules with the rest of it.
Yeah.
So, no, and I say that jokingly because that's what I did last week, and my wife laughed at me. But I'm like, I am not going to go down there and embarrass myself that I don't know how this is going to work, because I think everyone's looking to me to go, oh, Doug's the aviator. He's going to walk us through this whole thing.
Well, that's the thing. The rules have always been my weak spot, but I paint really well, so I just brought sexy airplanes, and I figured that would carry me.
They blow up just fine. Gray plastic and painted plastic blow up just fine.
Yes, it does.
So now I really enjoyed playing against two different forces and playing two different forces on my own. Unfortunately, that makes me actually want to own other Air Force's models. I'm certainly not going there, because the last thing I want to do is start a Luftwaffe Air Force, as I have a lot of Allied stuff that's unpainted. But I think it showed me that it didn't feel to me like 40K or 30K or even bolt action, where a lot of the knowledge is knowing the Army or the Codex. It wasn't that way. It was understanding how the aircraft maneuver and then figuring out which of your cards were the right ones to give you those advantages, or to give you that optimal way to make that maneuver happen. So it wasn't like going from being a Space Marine player and then suddenly someone dropping a Tau army in front of you and saying, go figure it out. And it's just, you can't use the same tactics.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I do like the card mechanic, because I just started playing Dust 19, and the first game of Dust I played was a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And it was a blast. And a lot of it came down to the card mechanic.
Right.
Because all of the cards are right there.
All the information is right in
5
front of
million
you.
rules to go through. I looked at the card. What does that unit do? Oh, look, it's right there on the card. Oh, what do the dice do? Oh, there's only 3 things the dice can do, because there's only 3 faces on a 6-sided die.
It's weird. You're taking a D6 and giving it 3 pippers.
It honestly is. And I've had people tell me, that they get frustrated with games like Dust because it's too easy. But for me, it's not, because it becomes more about the maneuver than it does about knowing all these grognardy rules. It was just about having fun, and it really was. I think that's what Blood Red Skies is going to be for me. This is another beer and pretzels outlet, where it's not like my Mechanicum army I play in 30K, where I've got a whole tome of 40 different weapon systems in one army. Absolutely. That you've got to know, and they all do different things. They all have special rules. That's not this, and that's a good thing, because I don't need another game that's that deep. And that's why I do like this, because I think it's something that once I knuckle down, push 2 airplanes around the board, I think I'm going to be able to get this.
Full disclosure, how many different airplanes are in your force right now?
So I got Yaks,
Yeah.
Lindley's Hurricanes,
Right.
and my Bombers. That's
Okay.
it.
That's it.
So, well, actually, I do
You're
have.
going to be the simple man of us because Brett.
I've got Aleutians. I do have Aleutians, MiGs.
Yeah, okay,
and
so-
they're hanging out. I haven't painted them yet. But
Yeah, but
they're out
Brett, how about yours? So what all? Just your Luftwaffe. So just
Brett's
Luftwaffe.
gone completely down a rabbit hole.
No, I don't think he's gone as bad as you. So this is why
No, I
I'm bringing
know.
this up.
All right, 109s, 110s. You want the unpainted stuff?
Yeah, yeah. What are you going to have to master to play the forces you have painted or unpainted?
Yeah, 109s, 110s, the HE 111s, and the DO 17s.
Okay.
Those will be certainly played.
Absolutely. And for me, Spitfires, and there's a couple variants there. So I have the cards for Mark Vs, so I'll be able to see how those play a little differently. I have Mark 9s and later model Spitfires there. I also have. I didn't have Typhoons. I have Tempest, but I have the card from the expansion for those for some late war things. But what's kind of concerning me is I've got this whole U.S. Navy, U.S. Marine Corps force that I haven't even touched. Much like you have an entire Zeros and Japanese force that we haven't played against each other. So
And there's a lot more that is now available for the IGN. So that's nice.
Exactly. So I think it's kind of funny that I have a little bit of the same feeling. We're like, oh yeah, that's fine. I understand my forces. They're all playing very similarly. And then I go, and I've got this Navy Marine Corps Pacific thing that I haven't played, which I can't imagine is going to be very different. But I think that's something we'll probably talk about once we've played some of those games is, did they play like Battle of Britain but with different traits? Or were those cards because the speed and the maneuvers were not matched? For all of today, we all had aircraft for the same speed, same firepower. We were, I think, also all the same maneuverability.
The Yak card
So-
and the Yak 1B card and the Spitfire cards on the same
Other
card.
than our aircraft traits, our aircraft performance was the same. It was just who was the faster, who moved first.
Yeah, pretty evenly matched.
Pretty evenly matched. I think Brett and I are going to find when we take Zeros against Wildcats, Zeros against Corsairs, we're going to find there's some different mechanics there because the aircraft are not matched. They are intentionally, as they were in the war, different capabilities, and you'll have to fight
We
them
haven't
differently.
busted out the 110s yet. We should try that tonight. So.
Right. And so that's going to be the interesting thing is adding in the multi-engine aircraft there, and just even the multi-engine mechanic, much less a much more firepower heavy aircraft than what we had. We were like, yeah, I'll take the pilot skill and add a die every time. No big deal. That's easy. Not so much when I'm flying against a BF 110 now. Much more firepower in that airplane. So it'll change the odds a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe I'll actually get a Pipper that's, gets me a boom.
Get your boom chit for once. You say that after how many boom chits you racked up on my
That's
guys.
true. I feel like I rolled a lot where I didn't hit anything, but
Well, and there is that too. So that's the funny part of this, that to go into that boom chip mechanic and to beat that dead horse. There were plenty of times that we took shots that nobody hit, and it was kind of refreshing that you have some poor disadvantaged fighter being pushed around by two enemy fighters and nobody's hitting him.
Yep.
Now you're keeping him out of the fight, and you're bringing the rest of the fight to those guys, which is good and bad. So we'll talk about some of the tactical decisions here in a second. But one of the things that I found very funny was is there were a lot of bandit gathering maneuvers out there where everybody really wants to kill one guy, and we were all guilty of it. And then we didn't think about everybody else flowing into this fight, and the fact that if you don't take the most direct route and run straight into the fight, and you curve around the clouds, or you go through the clouds, maneuver, and come out a different direction, then all of a sudden, you've really got to be conscious of who's guarding your 6 o'clock. And I know that I used that well against both you guys, and then Brett, you used it against me as well in a couple of those situations where you could pop out of the cloud, and there's not a whole lot I could do, if we had just, or if I had thought less about trying to shoot down the ME-109 that was in front of me, and more about, I need to point myself at the guy who's coming out of the cloud, so I'm ready for it. There would have been less exploiting of those unguarded aircraft. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. That was a good, quick discussion. We'll talk more tactics later. We'll talk more about some of the game mechanics that we're working through, because there's still a lot of other things out there that we want to explore and want to work with as we really get started playing this game more. So thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. And hopefully the listeners have gotten something out of this so that they realize the system may not be as daunting as it looks. And it's actually pretty darn fun to play.
There may be some veteran players out there going to hear this and maybe inform us of the mistakes.
I'm sure they will. So I always use the example of the RFZ guys that there's a lot of feedback on people saying that's not how the mechanic works. Go reread the rule book. So if you're out there and you are a veteran Blood Red Skies player, or if you're Andy Chambers, and we have totally hosed something up, drop us a line. Our Facebook page is out there on Facebook. You can go look for Lead Pursuit Podcast. Our website's out there as well with a contact form. It's got a big space in there where you can write how stupid we are and just tell us all the things we need to fix. And likewise, please give us some feedback on the podcast, things you want to hear about. Realize we're getting started into this and really trying to cover a lot of the introductory information. So if you're a veteran player and you're like, why aren't we talking about all the combos of specific aces and specific aircraft? We'll get there. We're trying to help all the people who right now who are like us that have picked up a box of fighters and go, what do we do now?
Yeah,
what do we paint? What decals do we put on there?
I'm looking forward to sharing some insights we have on the hobby aspect too. That'll be fun.
Absolutely. And so for all the listeners, we'll be doing a couple episodes talking about specifically decals and how to properly do some of these things. And as I'm fond of invoking, because I'm the least capable of the artisans here, the 3-foot rule. So the ability to take a step back and go, how much detail do I need on the models to make them look good, look professional, have fun on the table with them, but not spend all my days painting, because some of us don't have the schedules to do that. But then all the cool things you can add, like acrylic prop discs and all the other cool add-ons. Thank you very much for listening, everybody, and we'll catch up with you next time for another episode of the Lead Pursuit Podcast.